Welcome to another PSL Demo Day. I'm Jason DeBacker, an economist at the University of South Carolina and president of the PSL Foundation. I'm going to be giving the demo day today. It's going to be a short one that's going to hopefully help you kind of get your head around some tools that are used by a number of models in the policy simulation library. And this is a basic tool used across the Python software development community. And this is the tool of creating virtual environments for your software development. Let me share my screen and show you kind of how this is used in the policy simulation library. And while I do that, I'll say a little bit about what a virtual environment is. So a virtual environment is, you can think of it as a self-contained set of Python packages that are used to develop, say, a specific software program. When you load Python onto your machine and you go to interact with it, you're interacting with what is named the base environment. That base environment will come with initially whatever packages your Python distribution came with. So for instance, if you installed the Anaconda distribution of Python, it comes with a bunch of tools useful for numerical computing like SciPy and NumPy and Pandas. So all those packages would be in your base environment when you installed Anaconda. Now, as you proceed, and you might need to use additional packages for projects you're working on, and when you go install those via pip or conda or another method, those are added to your base environment. But another thing you can do is create other environments, so not just have a base environment, but maybe you have one specific to a given project. Okay, so I've got up here a web browser on the GitHub repository for the tax calculator model, which is cataloged in the policy simulation library. So if one is working on tax calculator, they might need some additional tools, say, that aren't included in the base, in your base environment with that, say, installation from Anaconda. Or there might be specific versions that are required of those packages. So even though you might have Pandas, you might not have a recent enough version to work well with tax calculator. To help, reduce those issues where you need a package and you don't have it, or you have a package installed, but it's not the right version, what the developers of tax calculator have done is to create a file that lists what are the required packages. Let me show you what that is. So I'm in the main folder of the tax calculator repository. And if I go down, there's a YAML file, environment.yml. I'll click on that. And what this environment is saying, what is the environment or the set of Python packages that are required to successfully run tax calculator? Okay, so in this environment.yml file, we've got the name of, in this case, the virtual environment that can be created with this set of dependencies. It's called taxcalcdev. Below that, we see channels. That's just, we're going to create a virtual environment using the Conda package manager. And here we're listing the channels from which we will be downloading or installing these dependencies from. And then below channels, we see the list of dependencies. So tax calculator needs Python. It needs NumPy with a version at least as great as 1.14, Pandas with a version at least as great as 1.2, and so forth. Okay, so you can see the list of package dependencies. It needs pip, and there's a couple things that are installed via pip, i.e. they aren't available on Conda or the Conda Forge channel. Those are JupyterBook and PyTest Harvest. So this file just simply lists the dependencies, obviously in a specific way, and specific syntax for specifying versions to use. But this file is going to help us create a virtual environment. Okay, and again, we're going to do this via Conda package manager. There's other ways to do that in Python, but I'm going to essentially follow instructions as are given in the Conda documentation for managing environments. Okay. So what I'm going to transition over to is a terminal window. Let's see if I have one open. All right, so I've got one open here. Let me just clear that screen. Okay, and so with this terminal window, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to navigate. So I have already cloned the tax calculator repository onto my computer. So I have all the files that are listed on the web page you just seen on that GitHub repository. So I'm going to navigate there. So I'm going to go to my repositories folder and go to tax calculator. If I list the files here, among those that are listed is that environment.yml file. Okay, so right now I'm in the directory where that environment.yml file is stored. That's the file we were just looking at that specified the package dependencies tax calculator needs. All right. So if I want to create a virtual environment, I'm going kind of one easy way to do it here is since this environment YML file is already created, I'm just going to type the command conda env create into my terminal. And what that's going to do is by default, it's going to look in the current directory, the directory I'm in here, and it's going to look for a file called environment.yml. If you had a environment file or a file that listed the dependencies and had a different name, we'd have to specify it. Here, environment is just the default name. So it's looking for this environment.yml file. And what it's going to do is it's going to read those requirements in that file. What Python version is needed, what packages and what versions of those packages are needed. And Conda is going to kind of do a little bit of thinking as you see this wheel spinning, and it's thinking about, okay, well, how do I figure out which packages conflict with one another, what versions I'm going to have to end up downloading. And then it's going to go ahead and download and install those packages we need. And at the end, what it's going to do is it's going to create this virtual environment. Remember, the name of it was taxcalc-dev. And so I'll have a new environment on my computer, taxcalc-dev, and it's going to have everything I need to run tax calculator. Okay. So we still see some spinning, solving the environment. This is where it's dealing with any conflicts. So Conda does a good job managing those to make sure there's not a conflict between the NumPy that's required and the pandas that's required, for example. Okay, and it'll do that with all of the required packages. And here we are, it's going through downloading and extracting the packages that we need. So you can see pandas here. We needed a version greater than 1.2. It's installing 1.4. All right, so it's downloaded, extracted all those files. It's installed the packages, and it's just finishing up here. So depending on how many dependencies you have and how large those packages are, the time we've seen here could take more or less than what we've just provided here in creating this tax calc environment. All right, everything installed up to this point has been coming from Conda. Now we're installing the two pip dependencies, Jupyter Book and PyTest Harvest. Doing a little more thinking here to make sure those work. All right, and now we have everything installed, and you can see this note at the end of execution that tells us to activate this environment, use conda activate taxcalc-dev, where taxcalc-dev was the name of the environment we created. Okay, so if you notice on the input line I'm on, it says base on the left. So I'm in the base environment for Python. Now I'm going to type what it says, conda activate, spell it right, taxcalc-dev. And now you'll note on the left, I'm in the taxcalc-dev environment. And so now I've got all the packages I need to run Python. So I can do, for example, conda list pandas and see indeed, do I have pandas greater than 1.2? And I do. All right. And so now I've got everything I need to run tax calculator, and I could go ahead and, for example, execute the code or just run PyTest to see that the unit tests pass on my machine. All right, so once this starts, I'll know everything was set up. It had all the dependencies necessary to run tax calculator. All right, so that virtual environment, super helpful here in that we can run just one command to download and install all of the versions of the Python packages we need to run that particular piece of software, in this case, tax calculator. So if you look through the policy simulation library, you'll see a number of projects following this methodology where they create an environment file that has a list of all the package dependencies, and one can create a virtual environment to interact with that software in a way that's consistent with how the developers intended it to be. All right. As you do this with your projects, just a few things I've noticed that are not highlighted in the Conda documentation. One of those is, of course, just be careful in understanding which environment you're in when you install a new package. You might be in your base environment, you install a new package, you switch to taxcalc-dev, and you find that package isn't there. Well, that's because you installed it in one environment, but not the other. Okay. So you want to pay attention to where you are, of course. Second thing I've run into issues with is my virtual environment might get stale. That is, packages are developed. Maybe we move on to a new version of Pandas. Maybe it has some different functionality. And I forget to update my taxcalc-dev environment. Okay. And this particularly happens when you have a bunch of different environments and you're working across projects, each of which has its own environment. Some of them might get stale. You don't update packages. And that's just something to be on the lookout for. This is a place where unit testing is very helpful, in particular, continuous integration testing on another machine. For instance, most of the projects that I help maintain, we have continuous integration testing that's run on every pull request through GitHub Actions, really every commit to a pull request through GitHub Actions. And that's often a time I'll see, well, wait, this thing ran fine on my computer, but it's failing on GitHub Actions. And, after looking at the traceback for that test failure, I can see, okay, well, this is an issue with, for instance, Pandas or NumPy. They've changed their API for this function. This other function was deprecated, whatever it was. I noticed that from those test results. And what I can do is I can update my code to utilize the newest version of Pandas. And then I'll change the environment to pin to that newer Pandas version. So I know when people want to replicate what I'm doing, when they want to work with Tax Calculator, they're going to download that latest version of Pandas where we've tested Tax Calculator. Okay. So again, it helps create that environment, helps reduce those errors. When they do arise, hopefully you see those through your unit testing and you can change your source code to help work with the latest versions of packages and just keep your environment up to date. So everybody working with your software is on the same page and has the same package dependencies. All right. So I'm going to keep this short. This will be part of our kind of intro series, getting started series to work with policy simulation library models. One of those useful tools, again, is dealing with virtual environments. All right. We'll see you next time. Bye.